Stranded on an island out front by himself, Brad Keselowski pulled out all the stops, nearly every trick in the book to try and keep Joey Logano behind him. But there was just no denying the pure speed of that 22 car today. How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric. Welcome to Out of the Groove Atlanta Race Review and Reaction Edition. Hope your weekend's been great if you're at the track today at Atlanta Motor Speedway. I hope you're getting warm. It looked pretty chilly on TV, mid-40s, and we all know how windy these racetracks can get. Pretty good crowd though, which was awesome to see. Spring race last year saw one of Atlanta Motor Speedway's best turnouts in recent memory. I was a little worried about today because between the July race and today, this poor track just keeps getting the most extreme temperatures. Super hot, super cold, there seems to be no in between, but awesome to see so many race fans down at Atlanta Motor Speedway today. Let's talk about the race. We will react to and analyze the two big wrecks in a few moments. We'll talk about the quality of the racing, especially when compared to the show Trucks and Xfinity put on last night. As with any super speedway race, we'll look at the top finishers. Should be some pretty fun storylines to highlight. We'll put this race on the groovy gauge at the end, but first I want to talk about the finish, the final few laps. First and foremost, I want to echo something Brad Keselowski said during his post-race Fox interview, but kudos to all the front runners today. The final 44 laps of this race went clean and green. Some rubbing here and there, a couple drivers rubbed the outside wall as well, but no wrecks. No big pileups. We didn't need 2, 3, a million overtimes. A clean, competitive finish, a thrilling final 44 laps of this race. Respect to all the drivers in the field for racing hard, aggressively, but like Brad Keselowski said, with respect. Kyle Busch said earlier this weekend that there is absolutely no respect in the NASCAR Cup Series garage between drivers anymore. The final laps of this race were a breath of fresh air, and I think Kyle Busch would even agree. As for what specifically happened, let's set the stage. With just a few laps to go, Brad Keselowski in that bright, beautiful orange King's Hawaiian Ford was in control of this race barely. Blocking both lanes, moving top to bottom to top. Great communication between he and his spotter TJ Majors, and kudos to the Fox broadcast for highlighting that. Keselowski had been separated from the herd, if you will, stranded on an island. Sure, there were other Fords up in the top 5, but he had the 3 Penske teammates all lined up on the inside lane, and he had 3 Toyota teammates lined up in the outside lane. Keselowski was trying to play both lanes, but he was the only RFK Ford at that point even still in the race. He didn't have a lot of friends up at the front of the field, but one thing Brad Keselowski did have, I believe, he had the field's trust. Brad Keselowski's run up front at dozens of these super speedway races. He's won many of them in the past. If I see Brad Keselowski in my windshield, I trust him. I know he's not going to make a stupid block, most likely. I know he's probably got a pretty good car. If you watched Daytona a few weeks ago, you know how fast that 6 is. So the one thing Keselowski did have going for him was trust. He had the trust of everybody behind him. Trust will only go so far, though. Ultimately, in the final laps, everyone's looking out for themselves, or at the very least, they're looking out for their teammates first. The Toyotas, unfortunately, were a little disorganized. Christopher Bell seemed to go a bit earlier than Tyler Reddick and Denny Hamlin anticipated. Bell got up to second place, but he didn't have enough momentum to pass Brad Keselowski. That slowed down the outside lane enough, perhaps, to allow Corey LaJoie, who shuffled his way up into the top 5, to push Joey Logano on the inside lane. On the final lap, Joey Logano had a huge run, swung up high to try and pass Brad Keselowski. It looked for a moment like Brad had the block. If he was really greedy, he probably could have taken it. But I think Brad was still a little worried. Logano was going to try and cut back down low. Maybe he thought that he'd stalled out Logano's run enough, because I thought he'd stalled Logano out. Logano got up behind Keselowski, hadn't quite gotten to his right rear yet, and I was just waiting for the 22's momentum to die, like we'd seen nearly every other car's momentum die throughout the race. But not Joey Logano. Joey Logano started on pole today, led every lap of stage 1, easily the best car. We know how great Logano is at super speedways. He's a very good driver at these types of tracks. The 22 was the team to beat today, and that car on the last lap refused to lose. I think Brad Keselowski did almost everything right. Again, if he was a little more greedy, he could have taken that block up high, the way Chase Elliott sort of shut the door on Corey LaJoie a little late last year. It worked out for him. But Brad Keselowski is not the kind of driver these days to make an aggressive block like that and put both himself and the rest of the field at risk. Joey Logano, with the speed in that 22 car, was able to take advantage of that. They still were very close down the back straightaway going into turn 3. But once Joey Logano had that outside lane, which was the preferred lane most of the day, there was nothing the field could do. Joey Logano gets the win, his first win of the season, the first non-Chevy to find victory lane. Truex and a Toyota won the season opening clash, but every points race since, it's been a bow tie in victory lane. Joey Logano in a Ford breaks that streak. Congratulations to him. Again, well deserved. I believe this now makes him the regular season points leader as well, so hey, win-win. Big day for Joey Logano. I think he collected 19 total stage points as well. So nearly max points day, gets the trophy. It's hard to do that at a super speedway. It's hard to do that anywhere, but especially a drafting track where so much is out of your control. It helped, for sure, that Ford qualified 1 through 8 for the first time since 1965, apparently. Penske, 1, 2, 3, that's how they stayed the entire first stage. There was no way the rest of the field was going to break through that Penske bubble. That helped for sure early on, but Logano had to come back from mid-pack in stage 3, work his way through both lanes, through the field, gets the win. What a performance from Joey Logano. But I have to say about Brad Keselowski, his time to shine is coming. He has had legitimately top 5 or top 10 speed in every race this year. Hasn't always gotten the finishes he's deserved, but he's currently sitting pretty in the points. He's well inside the top 16. He has, I think, a 50, 55, 56 point cushion, something like that. The consistent speed is there, something we have not seen from RFK in years. A win, I believe, is not too far around the corner. Lots to be excited about for Brad Keselowski, now driver, owner of the 6 car. Brad Keselowski was my pick to win today. If you've been watching my fast forecast shorts that I put out during the week, he was my pick to win. Oh, so close to getting my second dub of the year. Maybe next week, I'll be back with a vengeance. Still a great run for Toyota. You see Christopher Bell inside the top 5, finishes 3rd. Tyler Reddick is there as well, who was battling a stomach bug all day. He actually had John Hunter Nemechek there on standby in case Reddick couldn't finish the race. Denny Hamlin, also in a Toyota, finishes 6th, so not a lot of Chevys up front. The best finishing Chevrolet, as you can see, is Corey LaJoie, my boy! A very popular dark horse pick this weekend, considering how close he came to winning here last July. Ultimately, Corey LaJoie is the one who gave Joey Logano the winning push, the push he needed to make that move on the final lap. Corey LaJoie himself comes on with the top 5. I mentioned Brad Keselowski, who missed the playoffs last year, currently in the top 16. Corey LaJoie right now is 14th, if my calculations are correct, in the regular season standings. 14th for Corey LaJoie! 5 races in. That's no small sample size. I mean, it's not a big sample size, but that's 5 races, some very different tracks. Spire Motorsports has been a little more consistent this year. They've put some more money, it sounds like, behind that program, and they're making some serious strides in the right direction. Congrats to Corey LaJoie. Fantastic run for him. Some good runs for the rookies as well. Ty Gibbs gets his 2nd career top 10, but his first top 10 this year as a full-time Cup Series driver. And Noah Gragson, driving for Legacy Motor Club, gets 12th. His teammate, Eric Jones, finishes 8th. Good for that team. Joey Logano was the star of the show, but shout out to Team Penske. Austin Cindric ran really well, actually won stage 2 today, so credit to him. Got shuffled back outside the top 10, unfortunately, at the very end, but still a great race for Austin Cindric. And Ryan Blaney was right there with his teammates in stage 1, part of that freight train. Stage 2, made a near catastrophic mistake. Speeding on pit road under green. At most tracks, you'll probably stay on the lead lap. Maybe you go 1 lap down, but at this track, with the new pit entry being set up all the way at the entrance to turn 3, Ryan Blaney nearly went 2 laps down. And in modern NASCAR, you go 2 laps down, it can be very, very difficult to get back in contention. He managed to stay only 1 lap down by staying ahead of the leaders at the end of stage 2, which of course had that thrilling 3-wide finish that Cindric won. And then in stage 3, Blaney persevered, a couple more cautions, got back on the lead lap, moved his way towards the front, was a factor at the end of this one, gets a top 10 finish. Ryan Blaney's mistake in stage 2 nearly cost his team dearly, but I want to give the driver credit for keeping his head, keeping his cool, persevering, and getting a solid top 10 effort. At the end of the day, that mistake really only cost them some stage points, which stinks, but in the grand scheme of things, they'll probably live. Top 10 for Kyle Busch, another solid day. Todd Gilliland with a top 15, good for him. Let's talk about Ross Chastain finishing 13th. Unlike yesterday's Craftsman Truck Series and Xfinity Series races, today's race was clean and green for the most part. Bubba Wallace got loose, spun out, hit the wall 11 laps in. I was a little worried, but that was the only caution for incident until stage 3, when Kevin Harvick got loose and spun off the nose of Ross Chastain. It was unclear at first whether or not Ross Chastain may have bumped Harvick. It was a bump draft in a bad spot, gone wrong, caused a big wreck up front. But upon closer examination, it does not appear that Ross Chastain made any contact with the 4 car. I'm not a race car driver. I've never raced in a pack at Atlanta Super Speedway, so I can't tell you exactly who's at fault or if it's just a fluky deal. Aside from Bubba Wallace, who got loose all by himself in stage 1, we didn't see anyone else get loose and spin off the front nose of another car all day long. The fact that Ross Chastain was involved in the only one of these incidents certainly raises some red flags. I think it's safe to say Ross Chastain doesn't really get the benefit of the doubt considering his history. But in this moment, it's hard to say if he did anything wrong. Ross Chastain immediately radioed the team, hey, I didn't even hit him, which appears to be true. But Kevin Harvick, afterwards, after they interviewed him at the Care Center, said that maybe the way Chastain came from the right side to the left side, how aerosensitive these cars are, especially when you're right underneath them, right behind them. Perhaps Chastain's sudden movement so close to Harvick's car is what sent him around. So yeah, I think it was obviously an accident. Perhaps Harvick's car was a little edgier than most at that point in the race, but also perhaps a driver with a little more experience who's not quite as aggressive doesn't get so close to Harvick in that vulnerable spot, and we don't see a wreck. So it's hard to assign blame. Not sure it's really on any one driver more than another, but since it is Ross Chastain involved, it's hard for a lot of fans to give him the benefit of the doubt, and I get it. That big wreck took out Kevin Harvick, unfortunately. Also took out Chris Buescher, which eliminated Keselowski's teammate at the end of this race. It also took out William Byron, who was riding a 2-race win streak coming in. The only other big wreck of the day came a little later when Eric Almirola, the race leader, blew a tire in front of the pack. Poor Kyle Larson, who just seemingly can never catch a break at these types of tracks, had nowhere to go, got caught up in it. Huge hit for Larson and for Almirola, who said afterwards he got the wind knocked out of him a bit. Both drivers luckily were able to walk to the ambulance under their own power, which is great to see. Daniel Suarez, Justin Haley got some damage in this as well. Eric Almirola apparently was on 72-lap old tires when, I don't know if it was his left rear or right rear, I don't know which tire it was, whenever his tire eventually blew. That is a long run. I'm not exactly sure what their strategy call was because this tire blew with about 50 laps to go. Were they planning on not taking tires again? Were they planning on ending this race with 120 laps on their tires? That doesn't really seem like a winning strategy to me. I'm not sure. Either way, you hate to see it. I mean, Stewart-Haas Racing once again struggled. I was hoping today would be a good day for SHR considering the even playing field, how fast all the Fords were, including the SHR Fords were in qualifying. But Ryan Preece went down a cylinder, finished this race, I believe, multiple laps down. Chase Briscoe, I don't think I saw him once today, so I could not tell you what happened, but he was not a factor. Kevin Harvick was a factor, surprise, surprise, until he got involved in that wreck with Chastain, and then Almirola used strategy to get to the front, but at least he saw the front. At least he got some screen time before the tire blew. The best finishing Stewart-Haas car was 24th. Chase Briscoe, you've got to be kidding me. A tough week to have Tony Stewart in the Fox booth. Moving on from the top finishers, let's just talk about the racing for a moment. This is the second year of the new high-banked Atlanta Super Speedway. I keep putting the air quotes around it because that's not what it's called. It's Atlanta Motor Speedway. It's still an SMI-owned track, but it races like a miniature Daytona or a miniature Talladega. After last night's race, specifically the Xfinity race, there were some concerns. For sure. The final 60 or so laps of that race were decent. Looked like there were a couple different lanes. Drivers were able to make some moves. It looked like semi-respectable pack racing. You still had, Hemrick spinning Kligerman at the end for no reason. A couple other small incidents here and there, but it was the first half of that Xfinity race that was unwatchable. I mean, Justin Allgaier called it embarrassing for the sport. 2-lap runs, big wrecks, long cleanups. It was not great racing. Was not a good moment for NASCAR. Josh Williams parking his car on the front straightaway was by far the most entertaining moment of that race. Not good, not great, and I think it had every fan questioning whether Atlanta Super Speedway had already overstayed its welcome. Was the issue with the track itself? It had already aged so much in 1 year that maintaining full throttle drafting pack type racing was just impossible? Or was it more of an Xfinity Series issue? The Xfinity package is a little different this year. There's less skew, a little less side force in the cars. Perhaps that made them just too unstable, particularly when racing side by side, leading to more mistakes and more wrecks. After what we saw in the Cup race here today, I think it's safe to say the issue is more specific to the Xfinity or the Truck Series. Whether it's the cars, the trucks, the inexperience of many of those drivers, a lot of younger, more desperate, more hungry drivers in those series, whatever the case may be, they wrecked a ton of crap. The Cup Series drivers today, again, barely wrecked anything. The Almirola wreck was a fluky blown tire. Bubba Wallace, that was a single car incident. And then the Chastain Harvick stuff, I mean, that was really the only wreck where maybe somebody made a mistake. I don't know. The cars were definitely a bit edgy. The outside lane was the dominant line for most of this race, but maybe Atlanta Motor Speedway isn't really the problem. Maybe this will be a successful super speedway race for years to come. Maybe something has to be done to the Xfinity cars. Maybe they need to run a more traditional super speedway package. Trucks, I don't know. Today's Cup Series race looked like a super speedway race. It looked like Daytona or Talladega. Heck, we even saw more three-wide racing today than we did in the Daytona 500. After last night, I was worried SMI had created a monstrosity. Now, after watching the Cup drivers go to work, no, they just built a super speedway. I'm not nearly as concerned with how the track was constructed. Obviously, it's going to age. They might have to try some different things in the future, but for now at least, Atlanta Motor Speedway looks exactly like SMI wanted to. The racing product today looked exactly like what SMI and NASCAR drew up a couple years ago. Not every fan's gonna like that. Not every fan likes super speedway racing. It's a little more random. It takes certain elements of driver skill out of the picture, perhaps adds in a couple other different elements of skill, anticipation, communication between driver and spotter, seeing the air. You know, there are other skills perhaps at work, but it's not your traditional left foot, right foot, drive it in deep, save your tires. It's not that kind of skill typically. I don't know. I think your opinion of today's race, and I think I said this last year, is likely reflective of your opinion on super speedway racing overall. If you like Daytona and Talladega, you probably like this race today. You know, maybe aside from stage 2, which was single file for like 80 out of 100 laps. That wasn't very fun, but that happens at Daytona and Talladega pretty frequently. Aside from stage 2, if you like super speedway racing at Daytona and Talladega, you probably like today's race. That's my guess. And look at the crowd. It was 42 degrees and windy, and that was still one of the biggest Atlanta crowds I've seen in at least 5 or 6 years. So I don't know, sex sells, something like that. Let's put this race on the groovy gauge. I'm gonna give this one a 75%. Stage 2 was not fun. There was some interesting pit strategy in that stage, green flag pit stops, where instead of like 10 cars, all the Fords, all the Chevys pitting at once, it was like 2 cars here, 4 cars here, 3 cars here. It was weird how pit stops were broken up, but it made it kind of interesting to watch. Still, stage 2, let's take that out. Well, no, I guess we have to factor that in. But if we ignore stage 2, Stage 1 was pretty entertaining, even though Penske dominated, and Stage 3 I thought was fantastic. Very competitive, movers and shakers, a couple of wrecks, but we didn't tear up 20 cars. Again, clean and green, but competitive finish. 75% for me. I like super speedway racing. I don't want to flood the schedule with baby Daytonas, but I am personally capable of enjoying a pack race, a plate race, a super speedway race, whatever you want to call it. I enjoyed today's race for the most part, 75%. When it was good, it was great. Let me know what you thought of today's Am Better 400. It was also 400 miles, 100 miles shorter than the 2 Atlanta races last year, which I did appreciate. Let me know what you thought of today's race down in the comment section below. But that is gonna do it for this episode. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, please leave this video a like. I greatly appreciate it. If you're new to the channel and you love NASCAR, hit that subscribe button so you stay in the loop on all the latest news, race recaps, and more. And thank you to my Patreon supporters for your very generous support. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend. I'll see you again this week. We've got a new episode of Power Hour featuring myself and Brennan Poole, fresh off a top 15 finish yesterday in the Xfinity race. We'll have that coming your way here in the next few days. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next episode.